Preparations are underway at the Utah State Correctional Facility for the execution. Honie was found guilty of killing his ex-girlfriend's mother in 1998. He is the first person to be executed in our state in over 10 years, and he'll be put to death just after midnight Thursday morning.
Our Amanda Gilbert live outside the prison right now for us with a timeline of what changes will occur and what the public needs to know about tomorrow. Amanda?
A big thing happening tomorrow here at the State Correctional Facility is starting at 6 in the morning until 6 the following day. 6 in the morning the following day, they will be on lockdown. Here's a closer look at what else is happening. In the near future, midnight, August 8th. This man, Taberon Honie, is scheduled to be executed.
It is a somber week here.
Glenn Mills, Department of Corrections Director of Communications, explains.
It's not something that anyone sits around the table and takes joy in doing. It's a court-ordered responsibility that we take seriously.
So what does this mean for the prison? At 6 in the morning, it will go on lockdown for workers.
They will approach the day a little differently in that they will also have to bring their ID and be able to get through certain checkpoints.
For inmates, programming and work opportunities won't be available.
For example, Utah Correctional Industries, where they go work and do some furniture work, license plate, all that stuff, that'll all be shut down.
For Honie, he made 2 requests for Indigenous ceremonies.
He requested that he be able to participate in a pipe ceremony and a smoke smudging ceremony, and both of those took place on Monday.
Between 12 to 48 hours before his execution, Honie will be moved to observation, where he can eat his final meal, and he can still have some visitations if he'd like. As far as the drug being used, pentobarbital,
it's being stored at room temperature.
As far as what's next, there will be hourly updates starting at 5:30 at night on Wednesday. Mills also talked to me about that free speech zone. He said that a lot of the area around here is privately owned, and those private owners don't want that zone on their property. Mills also gave me an update. He said family visited with Honie today. He also said that Honie had a call with the spiritual advisor this morning.
The state set to execute Taberon Honie just after midnight on Thursday. Our Jim Spiewak live at the prison where the execution will take place. And Jim, you spoke with the brother of the last man to be executed here in Utah, and he talked about what this last 24 hours is like. Give us some insight.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark and Heidi. So as you mentioned, we are standing just outside the grounds of the state prison, and this place is going to be on lockdown tomorrow, beginning even at 4 in the afternoon. The road just to get in here will be closed off. And as you mentioned, we talked with the brother of the last person to be executed 14 years ago, and he says this last little bit, the last few hours, is just so tough on everyone involved.
Ronnie Lee Gardner, he was the last person executed here in Utah.
Ronnie Gardner is Ronnie Lee Gardner's brother, and he knows what it feels like to be just hours away from a family member being executed.
It was almost surreal. I mean, it just didn't seem real to none of us at all, our family members and friends of Ronnie's and loved ones.
Ronnie Lee Gardner was on death row for 25 years, almost the same amount of time as Taberon Honie.
You get to a point where you become complacent. You don't think it's going to happen, and then it snaps, something happens.
Ronnie was 2 years younger than Randy, and he says they were close.
When it happened and after it happened, it was like, wow, did this really happen? Is this a nightmare? This just don't seem real. Messed us up, messed me up a lot.
Randy opposes the death penalty and was out today protesting at the prison. He says 25 years behind bars changes a person.
People aren't the same people. When they do 25 or 30 years, any time in prison, they're not even the same person that they were when they come in. They change.
Just like Gardner, Honie murdered someone, and there's a consequence for that, and our justice system allows the government to execute.
I've had a little bit of communication with him. He's having a hard time right now. He knows this is coming. It's just scary for everybody involved, and it creates collateral damage. It creates.
So I reached out to some family members of the victim of Claudia Benn, the woman who was murdered by Honie back in the late 90s. And I also reached out to Honie's attorney to see if he would like to speak tonight. I did not hear back from either of those people, but I will be standing right here, basically right here, actually inside the prison grounds at this point tomorrow, because I have been chosen by the state to be a witness to this execution. So we will be here again tomorrow night through the execution. Mark and Heidi.
Jim, as you mentioned, this is certainly a heavy time for everyone involved. What's your personal feeling about going in and being a witness? You're obviously going to see someone die tomorrow night.
It's going to be a heavy burden, no question about it. And I have to believe that I may feel a little bit different after witnessing this execution than I feel right now. If I'm being 100% honest, I have some mixed emotions. I don't really exactly know how I'm going to feel witnessing someone's life literally coming to an end in front of our eyes. We do know that this is our justice system. Honie has exhausted all of his appeals, so he's gone through the process that we have in place. He, during his commutation hearing, admitted to the parole board, "I'm taking responsibility and accountability for this murder. I did this." That was a quote that he said. So he has taken accountability for his actions and says, "I will live up to the consequence, whatever that may be." Witnessing that, though, however, I don't really know exactly the feelings that I will feel probably until after this execution happens, just after midnight, going into Thursday.
And Jim, after witnessing, you have to come out and then you have to kind of communicate with us about what you felt and what you heard. That's probably going to be tough for you tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's part of the process here. It's required. There are several members of the media that will be witness to this execution, and then they're going to be holding a news conference from the people that witnessed it, and other reporters will ask us questions. And so it's going to be my job to take everyone inside that execution room and describe in detail what we saw. You know, this is what the executioner was wearing. This is how the room was laid out. This is what we witnessed. And so we'll be answering some of those questions from other reporters and explaining exactly what happened step by step by step. And I do have to imagine that it will be somewhat of a difficult thing to talk about, and then somewhat of a difficult thing to think back on, you know, as time goes on, actually witnessing this execution. I will say that in this business, we go to a lot of scenes and we see a lot of really terrible things, but we don't necessarily see the act of those terrible things happen. We show up shortly after the fact. So this instance is going to be a little bit different, where we'll actually be in the room witnessing this execution happen.
Executions. Okay, what is the cost of Taberon Honie's execution to taxpayers, you and me, compared to life in prison without the possibility of parole?
And what about the actual executioners who will put the condemned killer to death? Chief investigative reporter Wendy Halloran has been trying to get answers. Wendy.
Well, Heidi and Mark, like other states that have the death penalty, my investigation found Utah is secretive when it comes to the source of the drugs, the training of the executioners, and how much they get paid. 2 News Investigates dug as deep as we could, attempting to get answers for taxpayers. Taberon Dave Honie in the state penitentiary since 1999, sentenced to death.
I'm asking this board to allow me to exist in prison.
He wants to exist. From a financial standpoint, it's less expensive to keep Honie in prison for the rest of his natural life than it is to execute him.
I like to think that this is the easy way for you to go compared to what you did to my aunt. We didn't get 26 years extra.
At 1 minute after midnight on August 8th in the execution chamber, UDC Executive Director Brian Redd will give Warden Bart Mortensen the okay to fulfill the death warrant. The curtains over the witness window will open. Honie will be offered his last words. Director Redd will then signal for the execution to begin as the execution team begins the lethal injection.
Every study that has looked at the cost of using the death penalty all the way through to an execution has found that it is much more expensive to execute someone than it is to sentence someone to life without the possibility of parole in a maximum security prison.
2 News Investigates submitted a public records request to the Utah Department of Corrections in an effort to find out how much taxpayers will have spent from Taberon Honie's first day in prison up until Wednesday, August 7th. UDC's records reveal the average cost of incarcerating Honie from May 21st, 1999 through August 7th, 2024 is estimated to be $759,674. However, UDC says it could be higher or lower depending on educational training Honie received, jobs, the level of staffing needed for him, transportation to hearings, health care, among other things.
It does appear that Utah has followed with the models of other states in shrouding its execution protocol and all of this important information about the execution from the eyes of the public.
Robin Marr is the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center in Washington, D.C. The execution team is comprised of 6 people, 2 UDC employees, Warden Bart Mortensen and Randall Honie, Director of Prison Operations. 4 medical professionals are then contracted for the execution. To be clear, we did not ask for their identifications. 2 are the IV team, who, according to state code, are trained in accordance with accepted medical practices to administer intravenous injections. 2 are the execution team. State statute shows compensation for the 2 who each administer a continuous lethal quantity is negotiated by UDC and the Division of Finance with the executioners, the amount determined by the director of the Division of Finance. We tried to find out how much overall the executioners will be paid, but it's cloaked in secrecy.
Many states have refused to provide information to these questions because they claim that there are secrecy requirements to prevent harassment from advocates. We have no evidence that that happens, but it is also beside the point.
And what will they do if there's an emergency? Will there be enough medical staff there if the one drug the state bought to kill Honie doesn't work quickly enough? Keep in mind, taxpayers paid $7,900 for the original 3-drug cocktail to kill Honie. But following litigation by Honie's attorneys, now the executioners will continuously inject only pentobarbital into Honie's veins, which cost taxpayers $200,000.
I mean, these are legitimate questions to ask about the use of taxpayer funds.
Now, after initially denying my request, UDC sent this follow-up statement saying we will not be providing that information at this time. Those transactions are not complete. We will make a determination as to what can be released and how, given UDC's obligation under the law. Now, we will ask UDC again for the total cost after the execution happens and keep you updated. Wendy Halloran, KUTV 2 News.
He'll get to choose his last meal. Amanda Gilbert looks at the history and also the procedure surrounding this final request.
Guys, death row inmate last meals have been documented throughout history, but with that comes questions. So I spoke with Glenn Mills. He's the Director of Communications and Government Relations at the Utah Department of Corrections. We looked at Utah's history. Ronnie Lee Gardner, Joseph Parsons, John Taylor, William Andrews, Gary Bishop. You're looking at death row inmates who've been executed in Utah. They knew what their last day, their last meal on earth would be, unlike most of the general population.
You know, a lot of people don't choose their final meal. They don't necessarily know that it's coming.
Utah Department of Corrections Director of Communications Glenn Mills wonders if that's why there's so much interest.
Most of us don't have a schedule on when that's going to happen. If you look at the tradition, it does go back centuries.
The Death Penalty Information Center states origins of the ritual are unclear, but what is clear? So if you were to have a last meal, what would it be? Everyone
Fettuccine Alfredo.
has a different answer.
Cheeseburger and fries. Probably fish.
I think there's just a fascination with favorite foods.
Records show the last recorded Utah death row inmate final meal was in the 1950s. A firing squad executed Alicio J. Morris on September 10th, 1951. His request, black coffee and some fruit salad. Melvin Sullivan and Vernie Brash were executed on the same day, May 11th, 1956. After both were convicted for killing a gas station attendant, they requested the same meal, roast pheasant, tossed salads, and strawberries and cream.
William Andrews back in 1992, or all he requested, I should say, for his last meal was simply a banana split.
In 1996, John Taylor ordered a large pizza with thin crust. 1999, Joseph Parsons requested 3 hamburgers, 2 French fries, a chocolate shake, chocolate chip ice cream, and a packet of grape gum. Can you talk about anything you found particularly unique?
We've also seen people just elect to do away with the last meal and fast.
Executions are just not common. In our state, the most recent was over a decade ago. Ronnie Lee Gardner was executed via firing squad. He chose steak, lobster tail, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, and soda.
In 2010, it was Ronnie Lee Gardner. He chose to eat his final meal as I mentioned, 2 days before the execution.
So what will Taberon Honie eat if he is executed as scheduled via lethal injection August 8th? We haven't gotten to that point just yet.
It would be prepared in a box that we do with normal prison food.
Is there any concern about any type of food interfering with the drugs used for the injection?
Our medical team has not given us any direction to that point. So I think as far as the standard fare goes, anything is good to go there.
It leaves a range of possibilities and choice.
And then it will be delivered to them within 24 hours of the execution.
Before something that's final.